testing the sound check, testing. through this journey. Maybe we're far away from home, maybe we are close, but regardless, it's an opportunity to grow and to give ourselves the opportunity as well to be the best of we can be. A lot of self-discovery has to do with as well our mental health, mental well-being, or lack thereof. And I think that depression is something that all of us are always scared to talk about, but it's very real. But I don't feel it. The flick of a cigarette light shines brighter than what I can see of myself until it burns out. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Fida.
Thank you very much. This wasn't planned, by the way. She just, subhanAllah, things sometimes just fit into place without you planning. And that's one of the main things that we try to do these events, to remind ourselves that all we have to do is work and do, and things will just fall into place. So today's event is self-discovery. And I wanted to welcome every single person here. Having you here means a lot, and which means also that we're all, this is a topic that we're all, need and want, and we want answers, right? Before we go deeper into this, I wanted to thank the Student Council and their president, Mr. Amin, for a great job, for always having great ideas and doing this. Thank you so much. This event is very unique because it's not a one-person event, and it's not for a certain entity. It's rather an event done for students by students. That is why the Student Council is here. All the students from different majors from CIS, HBKU are here. Also, for our media team, we have students from Northwestern. Please welcome them. We have very talented students. I mean, it doesn't make sense why we would go outside to bring companies to actually do our media. They're experts already, so this is amazing. Even our poster, the poster for this event is done by a VCU student. Again, I'm not sure if she's here, I don't think so, but anyways, thank you. Okay, so my name is Fida Nasser. I'm the project analyst and focal point at CIS. I'm just here to moderate this whole event. Before we start, because as we said, this is a student event. Anyone here from Georgetown? No? Texas? Yes? Georgetown lovers? Hi. Yes. Northwestern? VCU? HBKU? Wow, amazing, good. Happy to see everyone. Okay, so we're gonna start. So as the poem said, we are all into this journey of self-discovery, right? We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in each one of us a unique thing. We are created for a reason. And all our life, we are looking for that reason, right? That's why sometimes we do feel depressed. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed. We don't know where to go. We don't know what's right and what's wrong anymore, right? The thing is, we are missing three main elements, or that we focus on one element more than the other. And that's where this presentation comes. So the three elements that we're talking about is the heart, the mind, and the body. So when we're talking about the heart, we're talking about spirituality, about faith. When we're talking about the mind, we're talking about psychology, about thoughts and feelings. And when we're talking about body, then it's health, right? So today we have very interesting and unique speakers and a CIS alumni, and also he's working on his PhD for the moral emotions, so he's an expert in this point. And then we have Dr. Sanabel. She is from the Sanabel Psychiatric Clinic here in Doha. And lastly, we have Noor, Noor from Hamad.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. And I think we need to thank Sister Fida as well for all the work that she did in putting this together. Um, good job. So, okay, so my presentation today is going to look at the theme that Sister Fidat spoke about, which was discovering yourself. Now, just as a little disclaimer, if we put the heart at the top, my presentation is probably in between the heart and the mind. So I am interested, you know, as somebody who studied Islamic studies here at HBKU in the heart, but also as somebody who studied psychology as well. I think it's very difficult to differentiate or separate the two. I think they're very interconnected. So you're going to find quite a lot of what I'm talking about is also about psychology, not exclusively just the heart. We could get into a long discussion about whether, you know, psychology is based all in the mind or in the heart, but that's maybe for another time. The main thinker who I'm going to refer to is Abu Hamad al-Ghazali, who is from the Islamic tradition. He lived around 1,000 years ago, but his work continues to be very relevant for Muslims and non-Muslims alike. But I'm also going to bring in a lot of other thinkers like Albert Bandura, a famous psychologist from contemporary psychologist. I'm going to look at Roy Baumeister, who's a psychologist who's living and working in the University of Florida. And one of the sub-themes, I guess, I put here is rooted revival. This is taken from our dean, Dr. Rajab. He mentioned this in his Futuwa series. And the idea is going back to our tradition to revive something that we need in the here and now. And I think I thought it was a beautiful term that he used. And I think the idea of revival is pertinent for Al-Ghazali because his most famous work, and probably some people would say the most famous Islamic text after the Quran and the Hadith, is Al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin, the revivification of religious sciences. So that's some of the ideas. So we're going to look at Al-Ghazali's work and maybe four key concepts. Self-vigilance, which is coming from his work, which is the idea of reflecting on the self. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on that. We're also going to look at the idea of self-control, self-efficacy, and self-esteem. So they're all quite connected. We'll get into the definitions a little bit later. I've just seen the time, by the way. Fida, how long do I have? Is it 20 minutes? Inshallah. Okay. So just as a quick summary of what I'm going to go over, I'm going to go through some definitions. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on the idea of the need for you to recognize the individual parts of yourself and the differences that you hold within you. A lot of, I guess, advice that we get is generally focused on people broadly. So a lot of things that we know, whether it's through medicine or through psychology or even through religion, it's talking about people broadly. Whereas I think there's an imperative for you to spend time getting to know who you are, because that's very crucial. So as part of that, we're going to just look a little bit about differences and dynamics, whether it's interpersonal or intrapersonal differences. I'm going to look a little bit at the idea that what's harmful in one context might be helpful in another, and vice versa, and that really reinforces the idea of you need to know yourself and you need to know where you're at. I'm going to spend a little bit of time as well, this is very brief, we're going to look at the relationship between, not the relationship, the dynamics of a trait, that all traits, very, very few traits are exclusively bad or exclusively good. The good can be bad and the bad can be good, and it's all dependent on where you are and how you're applying it. Then we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Al-Ghazali's concept of self-vigilance and what this means for us today, how we can apply it. In Arabic, it's al-muraqaba. Why and how. I'm going to spend just a touch on fear and hope and why that's important. And then we're going to, if Al-Ghazali's work isn't, you know, something that's going to be useful, I just put a bit of time as well on different contemporary psychological methods for you to know yourself, i.e. different questionnaires. We'll come to them in a bit. And then finally, and this is, I guess, this is partly because Al-Ghazali, one of the key ideas from Al-Ghazali's life was that you shouldn't just learn things for the sake of learning them, that it's no good just to increase your understanding of yourself and leave it there. You really need to change, or you need to apply the knowledge. So we're going to spend just at the very end, I'm going to go through some cognitive, behavioral, and behavioral scientific means of how to change, how to grow, whatever you've identified in yourself. And then we're going to conclude. So just to sum up, I think the first part is going to look at the importance of understanding nuances. The second part is going to look at the importance of reflecting on yourself. And then the third is means to change and grow, inshallah. Okay. So, definitions. Self-control, it's probably the most straightforward one to define. The capacity to alter one's responses, such as by overriding some impulses in order to bring behavior in line with goals and standards. This might sound like a very mechanistic, technical idea, but if you really break it down, and there have been philosophers and theologians who've spoken about this, this is one of the key things that can differentiate us from other creation. If we want to talk about other animals, for example, the ability to control ourselves and to set limits on ourselves and to have a goal in mind and to sacrifice things for that goal. So that can be really something that can elevate us as human beings. So while it's a psychological term, it's also deeply rooted in the spirit. And I think all spiritual traditions talk about the importance of practicing self-control. The second definition, does anyone know what this means? Self-efficacy. I probably should have given you guys self-control to define. It's much easier. Self-efficacy is taken from Albert Bandura. So he's a very, very big psychologist. He passed away just last year. A personal judgment of how well one can execute courses of action required to deal with prospective situations. I'm going to completely simplify that. Your opinion of how well you can do things. It's not about how well you can do them. It's your opinion of how well you can do them. This is self-efficacy. The third one, self-esteem, it's probably one you've all heard of. The extent to which one prizes, values, approves, or likes oneself. Robinson, that's the definitions from Robinson. So from those three, I have a question. I want to see hands. Which of those three is the most important according to research in terms of physical health, mental health, educational outcome, relationship health, all these, a raft of different measures. So who thinks self-efficacy is the most important of those three? Okay, we have a few hands there. Who thinks self-esteem is the most important of those three? I think that's about half people here. Who thinks self-control is the most important? So I would say that's so most of you think self-efficacy, self-esteem, sorry. So that's certainly what Roy Baumeister believed. He's the psychologist who defined self-control. He was studying in the 80s, and it was very much a time when self-esteem was seen as almost like a magic bullet, magic solution for psychology, for psychological well-being in students. So American universities invested a lot in increasing the self-esteem of people. He spent about 10 years researching it, and he couldn't find reliable correlations between self-esteem and a lot of different outcomes. He then went on to try to find what might the bigger solution be, and his conclusion was actually it's self-control. That self-control is this is backed by a lot of research, is more important in terms of determining a lot of different outcomes in life. We can talk about that a little bit later. Last definition, self-vigilance. The writings of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. So he's talking about watching over people's hearts until they supervise their inner states and attributes, and also take possession of reforming them and undertake to protect them continuously according to the requirements of this reform. He was somebody who was very reflective on, you need to spend time reflecting on yourself and change in a positive way. Now, this is something I came across on Twitter, and it really drives home the idea of the need for you to know yourself so that you can apply specific solutions to where you're at. If anyone can't see, can you guys see what's written there on the post-it? So they're post-it notes on top of a computer, usually where somebody might write a motivational note. What they've written is half-ass it and do it poorly. So why would somebody usually, I mean, if you're trying to motivate yourself, you're usually writing things like, go and do it, give it your all, break a leg. Why has this person, does anyone have any idea why somebody might write? Bayan, tfadali. Yeah, okay, it's kind of related. It's close. تفضلي. Go ahead.
I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So when you are like, go at it, do your best, be the best or whatever, it's like, I'm not the best. I want to do it. And I think that it's important to just do it.
Yeah, so that's even closer. So the person, and this is the tweet, if you can't read it there. So the person's writing, finally starting to make progress on some big projects, and I owe it to these Post-its, which help me bypass the paralyzing ADHD perfectionism that tells me nothing I could ever make or do is valuable unless it is done unassailably to the highest standards of any possible critic. So if you guys don't, for those who don't know, this can be a form of perfectionism that's common with people with ADHD, where they have to do everything absolutely perfectly to the extent that it can debilitate them from doing anything. So that's where these, I mean, if I was telling myself half-assed, I don't need to tell. I'm not a perfectionist. I need to tell myself the opposite, which is to do things better. But this is just highlighting the idea that there isn't, you know, one idea that everyone needs to go home and take. You really need to know yourself, and you need to know what you need. So that's kind of tapping into the idea that there's group level trends, and then what's really important is to spend time on yourself learning the individual level specifics. And the devil can be in the detail there sometimes. We have kind of touched on the idea that one person's poison is another person's cure. Where I might give an example of that is, for example, going to the gym. So if you have somebody who's a narcissist, whose ego is very, very much, you know, it's over healthy, it's beyond healthy, going to the gym is something that can actually worsen their state. But if you have somebody who has low self-esteem, going to the gym is something that could actually be a very, very important source of kind of building up their self-concept. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was famous for personalizing his advice. He didn't just give everyone the same advice all the time. He was mindful, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of who he was talking to and where they were at. So this is something that's also found in our tradition. You know, just for time's sake, I did this table just to kind of highlight this. So sometimes gratitude is, sometimes you should be telling somebody you need to be more grateful. Another person, actually no, they're already torturing themselves. They don't need to be told that they need to be more grateful. If somebody's anxious, they need to be told to relax. If somebody's apathetic, they need to be told to push themselves a bit more. And you wouldn't apply the converse. So again, it's just this idea that different conditions and different positions are not applicable to everyone at the same time. This is now just to kind of highlight the idea, this is not just an Islamic topic. We take knowledge from wherever it might come. This is coming from the School of Life. Has anyone come across them? Their videos often go viral. They're based in London. They're the brainchild of a Swiss philosopher called Alain de Botton. He's living now, and he started the School of Life. It's like a psychological school, but it's very, as well, secular. So he's an atheist, but he's an atheist. If we can put atheists on a spectrum, militant atheists who hate everything to do with religion, and you could put Richard Dawkins there, Sam Harris there, he would be on the complete other end of the spectrum, where he's an atheist, but he believes that religion has a lot of good things, to the point that he wrote a book called Religion for Atheists, which was basically talking about what atheists can learn from religion. And there's a lot of interesting things there. Anyway, so this is from the School of Life. They have these motivational cards, or these like self-exploration cards, and this one stuck with me. So the card began, think of the traits that you dislike in yourself or a loved one. Now think of the traits that you like in yourself or them, and consider what the relationship between the two might be. And it kind of struck me then, when I thought about myself, the things that I hate about myself the most, there's actually a connection with quite a lot of those traits with the things that are actually good in me. We can think about a lot of different examples of that, but for time's sake, I'll not spend more time there. And this is, again, something that we find in the work of Al-Ghazali, and he took it from his predecessors in the Hellenic philosophy schools, such as Plato, where he talked about, Al-Ghazali borrowed his example, where we look at anger. Anger isn't something that you need to eradicate from yourself. It's something that you need to learn to control. And in one analogy, he refers to it as like a police officer. So it's the police officer of the body. You need to deploy it to kind of bring about justice. In another analogy, he referred to it as a dog, and it needed to be tamed. Okay, so we're going to move on to Al-Ghazali's concept of muraqabah. So just a little bit about his life. I'm going to make it very, very brief. He rose up as an academic and as a scholar very early, very young. I think by the time he reached 31, he was basically the most prestigious teacher in Baghdad, which was the intellectual capital of the Muslim world at the time. And then he started a crisis. He started having a crisis that, if you read the way he wrote about it, it was very psychological in nature, and it lasted maybe 6 months. And it increased to the point that one day he went in to teach his students and he couldn't speak. So he realized something is going wrong. He went on an 11-year journey of self-examination, and he came back with a lot written and a lot of self-examination having been done. And it was after that time then he wrote books like Ihya Ulumuddin, which 1,000 years on are still influential in the Muslim world. So again, I don't want to make this exclusively about a religious view, but his conclusion was that the most important thing when you're reflecting on yourself is, why are you doing the things that you're doing? Now, that's something that anyone can take. If we extend it then to people who are from a religious perspective, his idea then is, were you serving God? So everything needs to be about serving God. Another idea that we can all take from his life was the idea that you can't just learn things or develop your intellectual capability. You need to go out into the world and into yourself and apply what you learn. He has a famous quote there: knowledge without work is insanity, and work without knowledge is vanity. This is actually a really good one. So it's related to the Dean's idea, the Dean series on Futuwa, but it's also a protective heuristic in the modern world, where I think a lot of us are very judgmental in what's going on around us, and we maybe give ourselves an easy time. He was actually advocating for flipping that around. You need to be meticulous when it comes to yourself. You need to hold yourself to account. But when it comes to other people, you need to make a lot of excuses for them. And I think I'm just highlighting that because I think it's also something that's very relevant today, and it's very relevant in the idea when it comes to self-discovery. And the final one, and this is all moderated by the fact that everyone is going to make mistakes. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has things that aren't perfect. And that's something that we need to remind ourselves of. So I think a lot of the time, maybe when we're coming at things from a religious perspective, there can be a lack of that realization, or a lack of reminder that everyone is falling short. And that's just the human condition. And that's the way we're supposed to be. And we're not going into the journey of self-discovery or self-examination from the point of view of judging ourselves in a negative way. So why? I guess I spoke about that a little bit. He believed that we need to reconnect with God, the idea of holding yourself to account before you're held to account in front of Allah. So I think a lot of his work is about reconnecting, submitting to and pleasing Allah, tawbah, and then probably more psychological in nature, the idea of character reform. So going into yourself, really asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing, and then learning what it is that's going on and working to reform that. He also has, I guess this is probably a little bit different in tone, there's also why we should go into ourselves and really understand ourselves. He who knows himself is truly happy. This idea that self-knowledge is the key to happiness, and that's not just something that Al-Ghazali advocated for, it's something we do find in Greek philosophy as well. And this is another point. The aim of moral discipline is to purify the heart from the rust of passion and resentment till, like a clear mirror, it reflects the light of God. This is the idea, again, that you need to polish and polish and polish and polish your heart by working against the things in you that maybe are less beautiful and less adaptive, and trying to promote the things in you that are beautiful and conducive to growing and conducive to letting other people around you grow. And this is a very much a Sufi idea that's not uncommon. So it's also then, I guess, this idea of going into the self, reflecting on the self, it's also a form of worship. We have it in the Quran, where the Quran asks, Allah asks us, have they not reflected upon their own being? And we have the hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 1 hour of contemplation is better than 70 years of worship. Of course, contemplation is not exactly always going to be self-reflection, but self-reflection does fall under that. Now, moving away, I guess, from a religious idea of what Al-Ghazali was talking about, and I say that in a really secular way, because I don't think we can separate the spirit and the psyche, but just kind of more, let's say, yeah, I guess more secular reasons why we would look into ourselves. If you're looking into yourself and asking, why am I doing this? Why did I behave? In what way am I thinking? It's also cultivating a psychological astuteness. You're going to become more mindful. You're going to become more self-aware. You're going to increase in self-knowledge. And you're also going to be somebody who's consciousness raising. This is a term that's taken from the field of behavioral science. It's also, I guess, about promoting a culture of accountability. So everything that you do, you're kind of holding yourself to account for it. You're not just living in kind of an aimless and mindless way. So these, I think the practice that he advocated for of going into the self and reflecting on the self is also going to transfer into other aspects of someone's life. So how? How do we do this? Two key things from Al-Ghazali. Number one, having a wird that is systematic and meticulous. So I'm not somebody who likes to do things in a structured way. I prefer, like if we're talking about developing my thoughts, I like it to come free-flowing. But I think the unfortunate reality is a lot of the time we need structure. So we could say that we're somebody who's mindful and we're somebody who's considerate of what we're doing. But I think what he would say is that, no, you actually need to set, by the way, a wird means basically an allotted amount of time, like a daily 15 minutes, a daily half an hour, for example, where you're reflecting on yourself and thinking about where you are, thinking about why you're doing what you're doing and how it relates to your goals. Now, we can't always be successful in that. There's, I guess, psychological reasons for that. So what we can do as well, he recommends, is engaging another. And he uses the example of Omar radiallahu anhu, who had Salman al-Farsi tell him when he was Khalifa, giving him feedback. Number one, feedback from Salman al-Farsi himself, and then number two, giving him feedback from the people around him who were too afraid to tell Omar what they thought. This is really important because when we're reflecting on ourselves, so it's all well and good saying, I'm going to examine myself, but the reality is we are loaded with cognitive biases. So I spent 2 years studying this field, specifically behavioral science. There are so many different ways that we are not really looking at things in an accurate way, and it's good to be mindful of them. It's good to try to eradicate them, but the reality is we're never going to be perfect with that. So engaging someone else is going to be a useful thing. And that other person could be a therapist. If you go to therapy, that's essentially what a therapist will do. One of the things, they're helping you understand yourself and giving you kind of a third person's view. You could reach out to somebody in your family. You could reach out to a friend who's trusted. But I've made just 2 quick notes here is protecting yourself against spiritual or psychological abuse. If you're going to someone and exposing your vulnerability to them, you need to make sure you trust them because there's people out there who might try to manipulate that. And then just in terms of a practical way, there's ways of buffering from receiving feedback. Now, if I asked most of you, are you able to take feedback? I think most people would say they are. But I think there's naturally something within us. Whenever we're criticized, we almost recoil and we get defensive. So there's ways of buffering against that. I'll not spend time there, but we can maybe talk about it later. This is just a graphic of some of the cognitive bias. I think there's been more than 200 identified. Just as an example of cognitive bias, has anyone heard of confirmation bias? Yes. Okay, so it's just the idea that when you believe something, you start to find evidence for that thing, and you make note of it, and you disregard evidence of things that of positions that go against that. And that's a way that we can snowball our ideas, and it's just one way that when we're looking at ourselves, we're looking through tinted lenses, I guess. I'm going to skip this just for time's sake. Basically, it's a Ghazalian idea, but it's also found in the Quran. This idea of approaching things with fear and hope. Why I really like it, especially when we're reflecting on, when we're thinking about self-reflection, is that you can't be too positive and you can't be too negative. You can't assume that everything is just terrible and it's all gone to waste. We should always have a degree of hope, but you also can't be always just blindingly positive about everything because there is a fear of maybe things not being accepted. So there's an importance of holding those two positions. And I even think from a psychological perspective, there's a maturity needed to hold these two almost, they're not contradictory, but they're conflicting positions. And I think that's something that you need to have psychological maturity to do. And Al-Ghazali clarifies that fear is not despair. It's not to despair. So fear is one thing and despairing is another. So, and if Al-Ghazali isn't your cup of tea, I didn't want to just kind of leave it there. There's other ways of knowing yourself, I guess, in terms of using modern approaches, mainly through, the kind of questionnaires that are out there. I guess a lot of you have probably come across Myers-Briggs. Now, I don't want to spoil the party on that, but I had quite a few lecturers who really hammered us for that. They said, don't use Myers-Briggs. It's not scientifically validated. But then we can ask the question, is something that's not scientifically valid not important? And I would say that's not true. Not everything is about science. But if you want something that's more valid or more validated, try the Big Five personality measure. That's a way you can understand yourself a bit better. That has been around since 1987, but it's been tested and tested and tested and tested so much, and it's quite accepted that there is these facets do exist. So it'll test you on extroversion, openness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and agreeableness. Now, if you want to look at yourself in a moral way, there's the Moral Foundations questionnaire. That's a bit more recent, but it's going to rate you on these 5 morals that the researchers say are found across all societies. There's a lot we can talk about there, but I'm going to leave it there. This is, inshallah, that's enough. If you're interested, you can check it out, or you can ask a question about it. There's also, now this is a bit of a curveball. This is the autism spectrum quotient. This is done by Baron Cohen in Cambridge University. Why I found this interesting is because we used to think about these things as binaries. You have autism or you don't have autism. What this is actually saying is that everyone rates somewhere in terms of autistic traits. It's not a diagnostic tool, but it's seeing the world with I guess, his theory on it is that people are either extremely male brain or extremely female brain. Anyway, finally, Al-Ghazalian conceptualization there. He also talked about everyone having within them a beast, a brute. There's a beastly part of ourself, a brutal part of ourself, a satanic part of ourself, and a divine part of ourself. Now, these are very good ideas, but they haven't been applied in the same way that Myers-Briggs or the Big Five have. I've just to give you guys a quick example of one Islamic psychology model that is relatively new, but it's more mature. It came from Rothman and Coyle, Abdalla Rothman. He's in Cambridge Muslim College, and Adrian Coyle, who is a fellow Irishman. He's in Kingston University. This was their Islamic model of the nafs. Now, it deserves a lecture in its own right. It deserves a presentation in its own right. But I'm just putting it there as a flag for anyone who's interested in Islamic psychology and to see something that's coming out of the field to show how the field is maturing. How am I doing for time? 5 more minutes. Okay, I'm going to fly through these. This is just give you guys a helicopter view of some of the ways you can change. So we've looked at self-reflection and examining yourself. Now you found things that maybe you want to change. I'm going to look at 3 schools of different ways you can change. The first one is from the cognitive school, going back to this, the idea of self-control, self-efficacy, now self-esteem. So I told you about Baumeister, and he found that self-esteem wasn't important. He wasn't saying it wasn't important. What he was saying was self-esteem is an outcome, is that you don't just drill into the person that they're amazing. They gain their self-esteem when they reach goals, when they utilize their self-control and their self-efficacy. Self-control are 2 things. Self-control and self-efficacy are 2 things that can be improved. We can talk about them later if anyone's interested. Another cognitive way is narratives, the idea of the stories that we put in our heads. We've also heard of self-fulfilling prophecies, and of course there's the Hadith Qudsi, I am as my servant thinks I am. That's a very, it's quite a deep thought, but somewhere in there is the idea of expecting the best. We could also look at, I guess, from a cognitive perspective, I'm sure Dr. Sanabel knows a lot more, can talk a lot more about negative automatic thoughts from the cognitive behavioral approach, but it's this idea that we're all getting negative thoughts all the time, and one of the key foundations of CBT is to identify them and try to change them. So they're cognitive ways of trying to bring about change. Now, we also have behavioral ways. As you'd imagine, the cognitive school thinks the human being, the most important thing in the human being, is their thoughts. The behavioral school thinks that the most important thing is behavior. How do we change behavior? So the 2 key ideas is punishing and rewarding. Don't recoil from punishing. It doesn't mean hitting or something. It just means a negative feedback mechanism. Now, I took this quote from Al-Ghazali. Now, if you have somebody who's working because they're afraid of punishment, or you have somebody who's working because they love their job, who's going to do a better job? Of course, the person who loves their job. Al-Ghazali talks about love for God is the farthest reach of all stations, the sun of the highest degrees, and there is no station after that of love, except its fruits and its consequences. This is a lofty, lofty position that, inshallah, maybe one person in this room will get to in terms of their relationship with God. But I think the reality is most of us, when it comes to evoking change, we're going to need probably more scaled back things. And the Quran itself talks a lot about reward and punishment. Again, punishment is not necessarily just like something that's really negative. It could mean not giving myself the food that I really wanted to eat or something like that. And it's very effective. It might sound rudimentary, but it's very effective. Another behavioral tool is to reinforce an alternate behavior. So the first two, punishing and rewarding, you're focusing specifically on the behavior. The third way then is promoting a behavior. For example, if you have somebody who smokes, you give them a siwak. They can't use the siwak at the same time as they're smoking, so it's just a way of kind of replacing another behavior. Finally, we have the behavioral scientific approach. This is the most new one. It's basically founded on the idea of nudges and the idea of cognitive biases. There's a lot there, and I don't think I have enough time to talk about them, so I'm going to leave it there. I just want to say one thing from the School of Behavioral Science. There's this concept of behavioral spillovers. What they found, there's quite a lot of research on it now, is that once you start engaging in one behavior, it transfers into other behaviors. So for example, if I start getting up every morning and going for a run at 6 a.m., there's a high chance then I'll start eating healthier. I'll start dropping behaviors that are bad for me. This is the idea of a behavioral spillover. I'm quite fascinated by it. And I love the idea of something germinating and growing. And I think we also find it in our tradition. The beautiful Hadith Qudsi, where we are told, if you take one step towards Allah, He will take 10 towards you. It's not that you take one, He'll take one. It's the idea of things accelerating. Walk towards me, I will run towards you. Again, this idea of something snowballing and growing in a beautiful way. And of course, we also have it in the Quran in different ways. And I just took this from Surah Maryam. وَيَزِيدُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا هُدًى. I'm quite fascinated by that. That people who are guided, Allah increases their guidance. That there's something there initially where they need to guide themselves, and then Allah increases their guidance. And I think it ties in very nicely with that idea of a behavioral spillover. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tamim, so much. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I didn't really want him to stop, even though I'm excited to know about the second part. Now we have Dr. Sanabel, who's going to talk about the brain. Here you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Masal Khair. Okay, so let's go. I didn't prepare slides because I want it to be like a chat. Okay, more of from my side, but let's see where the conversation is gonna take us. So, but I wanted to focus on something very important when we're talking about habits, whether we're talking about something as prevalent as smoking, I don't know, drugs, waking up late, procrastination, looking at the negative things always, being suspicious towards people and how they look at me. All of these, okay, it might not look to you as a habit, as in you actually, it's a doing, it's something you do, right? But we also have habits here inside, as in the way we perceive things and the way we analyze things. So a lot of us, we grow out of our childhood, and not a lot of us, to be honest. It's like more than 95%. Or maybe that's because that's my work, so basically. But a lot of us, we grow out of our childhood, and we're holding a lot of heavy rocks or blackbirds, whatever you want to call them, on our shoulders and backs, right? Some of us, we have lighter rocks than others, but we do have them. And these rocks, they form basically from specific psychological needs that we needed when we were kids during our development and during our development as children, and those psychological needs were not met, or we didn't have enough of them. And so those rocks started to form on our backs, right? And those rocks, they don't disappear on its own. They don't just go away with time, because what I see is a lot of us, unfortunately, we think if I leave the problem going on, if I just pretend like it doesn't exist, if I sweep it under the carpet, it's going to go away with time. No, it's not going to go away with time. It's going to get bigger with time until it becomes like such a big monster that will start introducing itself to your life. Panic attacks, anxiety, somatization, as in what do we call it? Psychological pain expressing itself as physical pain, right? I don't know, OCD, all kind of depression, personality disorders, narcissism versus narcissistic personality disorders, borderline, blah, blah, all of these things that we deal with. And unfortunately, sometimes we deal with them without knowing that we're dealing with them. So those rocks can be invisible even to the person that they're holding them, right? So that's going to take me to something else, which is, as I told you, what makes those rocks invisible is that because with time, we learn for us to be able to survive. When I said we just sweep them under the carpet, what we call it in psychiatry and psychology is the subconscious, right? So I pretend like they don't exist, but they do exist, right? I forget how did they form? How did I end up being this personality? How did I end up being this person who always perceives things in that way, in a specific way, and analyze it in a specific way, right? So I forget what happened in my childhood and what are the experiences that I passed through. But then my brain doesn't forget those emotions at that point, right? My brain doesn't forget those experiences, this pain, this trauma, whatever that I passed through, right? So I don't have the memory, but I have what is left of that memory. And that is what is pushing me to take those decisions and to behave in a specific ways, right? I'm sure you passed through experiences where like, why do I keep behaving this way? I know that I want to change. Every time I do it, I just say to myself, next time I'm not going to do it. And then you end up doing the same thing. You end up analyzing it the same way, right? So this is what I'm saying is, those are the cognitive patterns that Tamim also mentioned and talked about, right? So we were programmed this way, the way we were parented, the way we grew up, the experiences we passed through in our childhood. So those programs are there. They're already there, right? They're not going to ask you, can I analyze this thing this way? Can I perceive it this way in a pessimistic, this incident in a pessimistic way, or in a suspicious way, or in an optimistic way? It's not going to ask you for that. It's like an autopilot thing, right? So this is where also the automatic negative thoughts happens once I have like a negative program uploaded there. Now, so going back to, I just want to emphasize more on one of the most prevalent bad habits these days in your age and the younger ages as well, which is smoking, right? So smoking, drugs, and many other things, they almost all share the same start, right? And whoever can fight those habits, like to be honest, and if I see somebody who's able to get over smoking, what I usually tell them, you can get over anything. Because that's different, that's craving, that's your body's asking for something. If you will be able to reprogram your brain to get rid of it, anything will become easy for you. So, so let's go. I want to take you back of usually how these habits start, right? So how many of you, or how many of us, right? We go and we grab a cigarette in between, in breaks, in between lectures or at work, right? As a venting mechanism of the pressures that we feel during the day or the daily irritable incidents that we pass through, right? And we pretend like it makes us feel better, right? So this is one thing. How many of us, when the first time they started a cigarette or they tried a drug, is when they were in a dark place somewhere during their childhood or young adulthood, and they were like, yeah, this is not going to be my biggest disaster. What's going to add? Let me do it. And then they do it. But then the problem is they can never get rid of it, even if their life or that dark place is in light now, right? So I kind of like programmed my brain again in something else. How many of us, we started things when we were so young as a rebel mechanism against authority figures, like our parents, like my big sibling, who's very bossy and very controlling, and I just want to prove to myself that I can control something in my life, and I decide to try something new, like cigarettes or drugs or any new habit that I know that is not acceptable in that environment, right? And how many of us also has started any of these harmful habits when we were trying to self-medicate? And I see this a lot, to be honest. We're self-medicating our anxieties, our depression, our low self-esteem, our doubts, our unhappiness with the fact that whatever I do, I just it's never going to be enough for the people that I look forward to impress them and to make them feel that I deserve your respect and I deserve your admiration, right? So a lot of us, unfortunately, whether it's smoking or drugs, it starts as that. There is something that pushed that person to go into that way, right? And usually it's either pain or any of the things that I spoke about. But then what happens next is that it's a symptomatic treatment, right? So it's like when you come to me saying I have headache and I tell you, oh, you can take ibuprofen or something. And I never ask you what is causing this headache. When does it come? Why does it come? So I'm not digging more into the roots of the problem, right? So then even if I keep smoking for 20, 50 years, if I'm anxious, I'm gonna continue to be anxious. Once the cigarette effect is out, yeah, I'm gonna go back to where I was, right? It's the same thing when we psychiatrists use, what do we call, benzodiazepines, or which are basically medications that work as alcohol, same way, basically, okay? They're good, but they have their specific area where they should be they should be used. So what I'm doing here is I'm only treating the thing symptomatically. I'm not really digging into the roots why the problem has started. So that's why when somebody comes with me to me with a specific behavior, panic attack, smoking, drugs, sexual addictions, all of these things, I always make sure that I need to take them back to the first time they tried any of these things and what was happening at that time in their life, what pushed them to do that. And you will be surprised that actually when this happens and when he or she will be able to connect the ropes and how these things started and then how the ball gets bigger and bigger and bigger with time to a point where they couldn't get rid of it, at that time, you just feel that they have the courage now to start working with the problem, right? So I don't feel that resistance anymore. I don't feel that I have to convince them that it's unhealthy and they have to stop it. It's just that the puzzle fits everything in its place. So one more thing, by the way, about smoking specifically. A lot of us have started, so when I'm talking about people who started smoking or drugs even before 17 years old, right? I hope none of you guys are like that, but so when that happens, when we're adolescents and we're trying to prove to our friends who are always challenging us that about manhood and womanhood and blah, blah, and all of these things, so I'm gonna do that because I wanna prove to my friends that I am a man and I can do this, right? Or it's gonna add to my charisma. Or if I'm a woman, I'm different, I'm rebellious, I can do anything different, so I'm gonna start smoking, right? But then at that point, I can understand because at that point the person is really thinking about their present. They cannot see the effect later on. They can't see even themselves changing in 5 or 10 years, right? But a lot of these issues, unfortunately, they have started there and then it becomes a habit. Like you don't understand why it's doing it. Maybe actually you're done with your anxiety and you don't need it anymore, but it's just a habit. It's just something that you hold in your hand, right? So the other thing, and with that, of course, now, with that, if the parenting is not really covering for this generation, what is manhood, really? What is womanhood, really? What's the core issues of it? What's the core characteristics of it? We can easily lose that during our adolescent days, or like, let's say, our kids can easily lose that. They can really get affected by their friends' words because they don't have weapons to fight back when somebody is attacking them with that or challenging them with those thoughts, right? So let's say if any of the things that I've said or mentioned you could relate to at any point of your life or somebody you love, then this is it. This is where you need to stand up, and you stop, and you take it back, right? And so we're holding the rock now, right? You know you have a rock now. So you're holding it, you're looking at it, you're examining it, you're retaining those memories, you're analyzing it, and you're embracing it, right? Because change doesn't come from resistance. Change comes when I understand the problem, and I accept it, and I embrace it, and then I'm like, okay, this was part of me, but not anymore. Because when I started that habit at that time, I'm not that person anymore, right? If you still have those issues, then this is the rock. You need to work on it. If if you couldn't work on it alone, then you need to look for help. But that's exactly what I'm saying, is that all those bad habits, relationships, decisions, family disasters that happen is because we always try to cover the problem rather than face it and deal with it, right? And we just keep generation by generation, generation by generation. We keep just transferring it to different generations until somebody comes and decides to break that cycle, right? And so if you will be able to reach that point, whatever comes after that, it's going to be easy for you. The most important, difficult part is when somebody has to stand in front of their mirror and face themselves and see themselves, you know, how do we say it? Without any covers, without any defense mechanisms to protect myself from the pain. So I'm not afraid from the pain. I'm going to confront it. How did it start? How did it come? What was happening? And I'm going to deal with it, whether on my own or asking for help. Okay. Now, I know that we still, coming to a psychiatrist or psychologist is still heavy, unfortunately, in our society, but it's getting better, right? It's getting better. We're reaching there. So hopefully we're going to reach that point where people feel like the brain is just like the most important organ, where I need to break any kind of society stigma or society boxes to keep that brain as healthy as I can, right? So hopefully we're going into that, right? So then the last thing I want to end up talking about is that I'm sure most of you know this story. When God created us, right? So everybody was jealous, right? Satan was jealous because we know why. He has his own issues. Well, I'm not interested in that, right? But even angels were jealous, right? Because when God created us, they said, so I don't know how to say it in English. It's going to take a lot of time to translate it. But anyways, they said, no, what it means, why are you going to create someone who's going to kill and blah, blah, and do bad things on earth, right? So that jealousy speaking there, right? And we're worshiping you. We're doing everything right. Why do you need this? So, but angels are programmed to do the right thing. They're not programmed to confront, right? They were created to worship. So whatever God is going to tell them, they're going to follow. Then the question is, why God loves us that much? Why does he adore the human beings? Why is he giving us so many chances to come back to us, to come back to him? And that's because he gave us both sides, right? He gives us the angelic part, which is in our frontal lobe, right? So if somebody removes their frontal lobe, basically they're walking without filter. And that's what alcohol does. When we take alcohol, the frontal lobe is asleep. So you do whatever you do based on your desires and instincts, and you basically turn into an animal, right? Nothing, no filter. You say whatever you want to say, you do whatever you say, and that's why people could do crimes under the effect of alcohol. So that's the angelic part, which is the frontal lobe, right? It's a specific area in the frontal lobe. Now we have also the Satan part, which is the limbic system, deep inside the brain. That system always will push you not to do anything that will cause you stress, even in prayer. Because when you move, you're stressing yourself, right? You're not happy. This is like something an effort you do. So if you take longer time until you get up and start playing, right? Or if you sit too much and letting that limbic system deep there takes its effect there, it's gonna convince you not to do anything. Even if that's beneficial to you, it's gonna convince you not to do it. Because its role is to make you happy. Its role is to make you do whatever you want, whatever you desires, right? Without any boundaries, without right or wrong. It doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the animal part of us. So God, when he created us, he knows that he gave us this and this, and then he told us it's going to be your decision which part do you want that is going to control your life most of the time. He didn't ask for perfectionism, right? He didn't tell us, I want you only to decide one part to control you, because he knows that we're going to make mistakes. But as long as that filter is here and it's working well, and I'm not poisoning it with so many, things, then it's gonna start working. It's gonna drag me back to the right way, right? So that's why God loves us so much, and he created everything around us to help us be on the right path, because he knows that this fight is not easy. It's not gonna be easy to resist all of this. It's not gonna be easy to consciously let the frontal lobe, moves you around, and you push the limbic system to sleep a little bit, right? So it's not an easy fight, And he knows that. That's why God says, even if in your last minute you come back to me, I have that door open, right? So now why did I say all this? Because basically, if you think about it, it's that specific organ that makes us humans, right? Otherwise, if I take somebody's brain, what's the difference between him and like an animal, right? So animal, we share with animals other organs. But the brain, no, we don't share that. They have, brains, but primitive, right? They don't have this, what we have. So our brain deserves any kind of fight that you have to go through to keep it as healthy the longest period you can inside or during your life, right? With this brain, to keep it healthy, you have to stop smoking, you have to stop drugs, you have to go into hospital, you have to go to a psychiatrist, you have to travel to, I don't know, a different planet to do it, but do it. Because that's what makes us humans. And I think I'm going to end it here.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Now, last but not least, Ms. Noor from Hamad Hospital is going to talk to us about the body and taking care of hidden addiction.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Noor Nakib. I'm the Healthcare Services Administrator at the Tobacco Control Center at Hamad Medical Corporation. Thank you, Dr. Sanabel and Tamim, before you. Both of you mentioned tobacco. I just wanted to add on what they mentioned. So they talked about tobacco use being a habit. It is also an addiction. So nicotine in tobacco is the main element behind addiction, and that's why a lot of people have a hard time quitting or stopping whatever they are addicted to. So basically, it's treating the addiction side as well as the breaking the habit as well. Okay, so I'll start my presentation by giving an overview about the Tobacco Control Center at Hamad Medical Corporation. I'll talk a bit about the global tobacco epidemic, the tobacco or novel nicotine products that are found here in Qatar, tobacco addiction, harmful effects of tobacco use in general, secondhand smoking, benefits of quitting, the roadmap to quit, and the treatment options that are found at our center. So a bit about the center. We started as a smoking cessation clinic back in 1999. It was headed by Dr. Ahmed who is also the director of the center. And then with time we expanded and the tobacco control unit was established in 2010. And finally we grew and expanded more into a tobacco control center that was inaugurated in 2018. We are a WHO collaborating center. We got the designation in 2017 for a period of 4 years, and then we were redesignated again back in 2021 for another 4 years. The first anti-smoking law in Qatar was established and published in 2002, and then it was amended in 2016. Qatar signed the WHO Framework on Convention on Tobacco Control in 2003, and the ratification, and it was ratified in 2004. So basically, I will be discussing, my presentation is only about tobacco and not drugs nor addiction. So it's only about tobacco. This is our specialty. We do not receive, or we do not welcome, or we do not treat people who are addicted to any other drug other than tobacco or nicotine. So the main pillars in the center, basically, as I mentioned, we have smoking cessation clinics. We provide tobacco cessation services to whoever needs them. We receive around 14,000 patients per year. The quit rate is around 30 to 35%, which is very comparable to international rates as well. We have tobacco cessation and laser therapy clinics, and we have a team of experts. We have a team of certified specialists, clinical psychologists, researchers, coordinators, health educators as well, etc. We do a lot of outreach and training activities, such as this one. We do trainings for healthcare providers, and we teach them how to treat tobacco-dependent patients. We also do a lot of research, local, regional, and international. And since we are a WHO collaborating center, we are entitled to achieve a list of activities each year under the following TORs: WHO trainings and workshops, as I mentioned, increasing the knowledge, strengthening the knowledge and capacity of the community or healthcare providers in general regarding treating tobacco dependence. And we also work on the youth as well in regards to that topic. So this is a collection of pictures of the awareness activities and trainings that we've participated or done before during the years. So part of the public health, Qatar public health strategy is to decrease, to reduce smoking prevalence by 5%, and basically that's our job. So we work collectively with different concerned stakeholders. 6.5 trillion cigarettes are sold around the world each year. 1.3 billion users exist around the world. Unfortunately, 80% of them live in low and middle income countries. 7 million of the overall deaths are the result of direct tobacco use, and 1.3 million are the result of indirect tobacco use, that is secondhand smoking or passive smoking. Around 25% of heart disease death and 90% of lung cancer death are directly attributed to tobacco use and smoking. So tobacco use, and the number of people who die from smoking is more than those who die from AIDS, car accidents, drug use, and suicide combined. So the difference between those who die from tobacco use and the others, basically most of those, the effect of tobacco on your body or on health in general is probably not direct. So it takes quite a long time, probably months or years, for you to experience what tobacco is doing, how it's harming your body, and how it's affecting your health negatively. The life expectancy for smokers is at least 10 years shorter than non-smokers, and every cigarette you smoke takes away approximately 11 minutes of your life. Okay, so basically we have the tobacco or nicotine products in Qatar can be categorized into two different categories. You have the traditional tobacco products and you have the novel nicotine or tobacco products. Under the traditional, I think most of you know them. You have the cigarettes, you have the shisha, the cigar, the midwakh, smokeless tobacco such as Sueka, for example. And under the novel nicotine or tobacco products, basically those are illegal in Qatar, and they are found in the country for personal use only. We have the electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems, such as e-cigarettes and e-hookahs, the heated tobacco products, and lastly, the nicotine pouches, such as Lift and Fox. Those are trending a lot now recently. The nicotine pouches are trending a lot, as well as the heated tobacco products and the e-cigarettes in general. So law number 10 of 2016 on the control of tobacco and its derivatives states that importing, circulating, displaying, selling, distributing, and manufacturing chewing tobacco in any form, electronic cigarettes, shisha, or simulators of smoking tools, Sueka in any forms shall be prohibited. But unfortunately, you found these being sold either under the table on social media or any other platform, or for personal use. The novel nicotine products, so basically, as I mentioned before, they are trending now a lot. They are found in the airport, actually. You can buy them from the airport on arrival. And I don't know if on departure, I'm not sure if on arrival as well. You can? Yeah. Okay. There you go. Okay. So those products are being portrayed as techniques or methods for people to quit smoking or tobacco use in general. So a lot of people believe or assume that those methods are tobacco cessation products, but no, they're not. They do contain nicotine, which we all know that nicotine is harmful for the gum and the upper lip. So basically, the nicotine in those products is absorbed through the tissues in your mouth, and that's how they enter your body. As I mentioned, they are being marketed by tobacco products as of reduced harm and as a method to quit conventional or traditional tobacco. But we're trying our best to raise awareness regarding that and just to tell people that no, this is not an evidence-based technique or method to quit tobacco use. You have several methods that are well-tested, that are scientific and proven to be effective, and this is not one of them. So e-cigarettes and e-hookahs, the electronic nicotine delivery systems and the electronic non-nicotine delivery systems, as well as heated tobacco products, those are also being portrayed by tobacco industries to be of reduced harm, and that they can help people quit conventional tobacco use, just like nicotine pouches. But we're trying as much as we can to inform people that this is not true. If you want to quit smoking cigarettes or shisha or whatever tobacco product you're addicted to, you will have to completely quit using the scientifically proven methods and not shifting from using one product into another. At the end of the day, those products are still new, they're trending. What we know so far is a little, but what we do know that they are inflicting harm on people and their health. So electronic cigarettes, they do not contain tobacco, but they do contain nicotine. They are battery-powered products that heat liquid, which is called a juice. This liquid contains nicotine and other cancer-causing chemicals. As I mentioned before, nicotine is very addictive, and that's why you get addicted to any product that contains nicotine. And that's why you find it very hard to quit. So the nicotine content in e-cigarettes can range from 0 to more than 66 milligram per milliliter, which is at least twice the nicotine content of a standard cigarette. The liquid, as I mentioned, it has cancer-causing chemicals and other toxins. E-cigarettes can young people who start smoking e-cigarettes because they're trendy, they shift in the future into using the traditional tobacco products such as cigarettes because they got addicted to the nicotine. The e-cigarettes, they create a vapor called an aerosol. As you can see in the image in front of you, aerosol contains volatile organic compounds, ultrafine particles, heavy metals, cancer-causing chemicals. All those are being inhaled by you, the user, and the people sitting around you. So e-cigarettes can cause unintended injuries. It can either cause fires and explosions, resulting in serious injuries because of defective batteries, for example, or even poisoning among children, either by absorbing or inhaling or swallowing the liquid, the e-liquid that you use in e-cigarettes, especially if you store it in a place where any child can just reach it. And they do not know what it is, so they just think it's a liquid or something, and they just, or the juice, and they just swallow it. Heated tobacco products, so those kinds of products are different than e-cigarettes. Why? Because those products, they contain tobacco, while e-cigarettes, they do not contain tobacco. But the difference between heated tobacco products and the traditional tobacco products, such as cigarette, is that those products heat tobacco instead of burning tobacco just like cigarettes do. As I mentioned before, all those products, they contain nicotine. Those products also produce an aerosol that contains toxins and other cancer-causing chemicals, which are also swallowed by you and the people around you, and thus inflict harm on you and your loved ones as well. And all those products have been marketed by tobacco industries as of reduced harm and a way to just quit any other conventional tobacco product. So tobacco addiction, tobacco, it's a plant that is dried and prepared for chewing or smoking. It contains 70 cancerous chemicals. Nicotine, as I mentioned, is a toxic liquid which is highly addictive. It decreases metabolic activity, leads to harder time to focus, and leads to impairments in memory. And addiction is the urge to do something that is hard to control or stop. And that's why I mentioned that a lot of people, like 60% of smokers or tobacco users, they wish they could quit. They have a hard time doing so. I'm not saying that it is impossible to quit. A lot of people have already quit smoking or using any other type of tobacco product. But sometimes they will relapse, other times they will quit, and then they will relapse again, and then they will come back and quit. So it is possible to quit if you seek the appropriate and necessary support. For sure, it will even double or triple the chances of you successfully quitting. So, ranking of tobacco dependence. Why am I saying that tobacco addiction is a serious issue? And as Dr. Sanabel mentioned, that if a person was able to quit, he can just quit any other drug they are addicted to. You can see in the table in front of you, so the mean dependence score of tobacco is very similar to cocaine and alcohol. So it's higher even than cannabis. the pleasure that you get from tobacco is very similar to that of alcohol. The psychological dependence you get from tobacco is similar to cocaine, and the physical dependence is quite similar to cocaine and alcohol. So as Dr. Sanabel mentioned, if you can quit tobacco, you just can quit any other drug. And as Dr. Ahmed usually says, that he always repeats this. So a patient once came to his clinic when he was still running the clinic, and he told him that I can quit hashish, I can quit using hashish, but I cannot quit tobacco. I cannot quit cigarettes. So chemical constituents of cigarettes, all forms of tobacco products are harmful. Tobacco is inherently toxic and it contains carcinogens even if it's in its natural form. Nicotine, unfortunately, is a culturally and socially acceptable, dangerous, addictive drug. So at least 250 of the constituents of is less harmful than smoking cigarettes. So, does anybody assume that here? Okay, so in the table in front of you, you can see the comparison between smoking a single shisha session versus a single cigarette. So the amount of tar in a single shisha session compared to a single cigarette is 36 times more. The amount of nicotine is 1.7, almost double. And the carbon monoxide the carbon monoxide, which is the very toxic gas that you get that enters your body in a single shisha session compared to a single cigarette is 8.4 times more. So no, this is a misconception. Smoking a single shisha session is not less harmful or safer than smoking a single cigarette. And I'm not saying that opt for smoking a single cigarette because it's the amount of toxins that will, at the end of the day, if you're smoking a single cigarette or a shisha, they both have toxins that will eventually enter your body and harmful effects of tobacco or smoking in general. As you can see in the diagram in front of you, so basically tobacco use and smoking harm every single organ in your body, like every single organ, whether it leads to cancer in the future or to chronic illnesses. The main toxic elements in tobacco are nicotine, carbon monoxide, and tar. We already talked about nicotine before, so it's the reason behind the physical addiction that you get to any tobacco product that you are using. Carbon monoxide is a very toxic gas. It inhibits the function of red blood cells and thus leads to insufficient oxygen supply. And tar is the main cause of cancer. All those toxic elements, along with other toxins as well, lead to increased blood pressure, poor performance, heart attacks, strokes, bronchitis, and a lot of other health problems as well. So tobacco use is the leading cause of preventable, and I stress on preventable because it's something that you can prevent, disease, disability, and death. The risk of coronary heart disease among smokers is 2 to 4 times more likely compared to non-smokers. The risk of developing lung cancer is 25 times more likely among smokers compared to non-smokers. The higher the number of cigarettes you smoke, the higher the risk of you to get a stroke, the risk of stroke. So if you smoke 20 cigarettes per day, you are 6 times more likely to have a stroke compared to a non-smoker. The risk of developing type 2 diabetes is 30 to 40 times higher for a current smoker than a non-smoker. Smoking during pregnancy increases the risk of complications, including premature birth and low birth weight. And smoking can reduce men's fertility. So this is a sample of how tobacco use and smoking affect the skin, for example, the heart, the lungs, and how smokeless tobacco can affect your mouth. And basically, smokeless tobacco increases the risk of mouth cancer and the area around the mouth. Secondhand smoking, 1.2 million out of the 8 people who are killed annually by tobacco use are non-smokers who are exposed to secondhand smoke. There is no risk-free level of secondhand smoke, so even if you're briefly exposed to secondhand smoke, this will affect you negatively. I'm not going to go through this. I think most of you already know what secondhand smoke is. So how can you protect your family? You can protect your family by not allowing people to smoke in the house, in the car, making sure that your kids go to daycares that are smoke-free and tobacco-free. While going to restaurants, try to avoid going to sitting and smoking and even non-smoking sections because they do not fully protect you. If you are a smoker or a tobacco user yourself, be a good role model and just decide to quit. Teach your children to stay away from secondhand smoke. Explain to them what the negative effects of secondhand smoke can impose on their health and their well-being in general. Benefits of quitting. There are immediate benefits and long-term health benefits of quitting. So whenever you decide to quit, at the instance of you quitting, after 20 minutes, your heart rate and blood pressure will drop back to normal. After 12 hours, the carbon monoxide that we just discussed, the toxic gas, will get back to normal, so it will leave your body and the level of oxygen will get back to normal. After 48 hours, the sense of taste and smell will improve. And a lot of people who have quit, a lot of our patients who have already quit have mentioned those. So they have mentioned that they taste better, they can smell better, their overall energy improved, their breathing got better, they can feel that their lungs are cleaning themselves, their body is cleaning itself, etc. So you have immediate and long-term benefits. You also have financial benefits as well. So you'll be saving money and probably using that saved money by either, I don't know, using that saved money to self-discover yourself or self-meditate. Okay, so whoever wants to quit smoking or whoever wants to quit any type of tobacco product in general, they can just call us. They do not need a referral on anything. So you can just call us and we will provide you with an appointment. After you come to your appointment for sure, and then you will fill a patient assessment form. You will consult with one of our specialists at the clinic. Will also be given psychological support by our clinical psychologist, and we will follow you up for a period of approximately like 5 to 6 months, just to make sure you're on the right track. So patients are given follow-up visits after 2 to 4 weeks for a period of 6 months, as I mentioned. And usually after 12 months, we call our patients just to make sure that they're on the right track. They did not relapse. If they relapse, we ask them if they want an appointment again. If they felt that they needed the appointment, we will book an appointment directly. If not, we just advise them that whenever you feel you are ready, then just call us and we'll provide you with an appointment. As I mentioned, you do not need a referral, so you can either call our clinic or our center directly, and we can book an appointment for you. And we got also referrals from other healthcare facilities as well. The treatment options that I found at the center, we have health education and psychological counseling, medication. So medication combined with health education and psychological counseling, they are all essential, and using them together more than double the chances of quitting. We have NRT, the nicotine replacement therapy. In our clinic, we only use the lozenges and the patches. They do give you nicotine, yes, but they do not give you the other toxic chemicals that are found in tobacco products. And the amount of nicotine that is entering to your body from those treatment options is basically tested, and you're not getting the extra nicotine that you get usually from other tobacco products. And they are dosed, so you start with the high dose, and then gradually it's basically getting gradually so when you're addicted to something, instead of cutting it off at once, it's you are getting rid of that addiction in a gradual way, to say the least. Okay, and we have the laser treatment therapy, which is a painless innovative technique. It is basically quite similar to Chinese acupuncture, where certain points in your body are stimulated to release endorphins, and it is a technique that is used in our clinic to help tobacco users quit. Motivational tools, we use the carbon monoxide monitor. This monitor, basically, it measures the carbon monoxide level in one's breath. And why is it a motivational tool? Because the patient will notice the difference, or notice the decrease in the level of nicotine when they first come to the clinic, and after a while. So when they first come to the clinic, they get a reading of 20, and on their follow-up appointment, they get a reading of 10. So that's why it's a motivational tool. They can see something that is there, that their body is getting rid of the toxin. Withdrawal symptoms, okay. So basically, for headache, those are the normal or prevalent withdrawal symptoms that are usually experienced by tobacco users who quit. So for headache, you can take a painkiller. For cravings, you can drink vitamin C or water. Tamim mentioned something about breaking the habit. It is very important to break the habit, especially when you're quitting something that you're addicted to, or when you're quitting something that is actually a habit. Try to stay busy. You might gain weight, but it's fine as long as it's monitored and you're doing something about it. So you can increase your exercise, try to walk, to run, to etc. Try as much as you can to keep yourself busy. So this is the location of the centers. We try to expand our services to ensure that those services are available and accessible to everyone in the country. They are free, by the way, so the consultation is for free. You just pay a small amount for the treatment that you're given. The clinics are located in our center in Medical City, in Hamad General Hospital, Al-Wakra, Hazm Barik, and Al-Khor hospitals. And we're planning to open clinics in Heart Hospital and the National Service Academy. Those are our contact numbers, and as I mentioned, we're located in Hamad Medical City. Whoever needs help or whoever needs support, or if you know people around you who are tobacco users and want to quit and they need support, you can just give them their numbers and our numbers, and we can book an appointment for them directly. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you everyone. So lastly, what we will have is the panel discussion. But I am aware that it's past Maghrib time, so do you guys want to take like 10 minutes and then come back for the panel discussion so we can really give it time? Yes? So let's say by 5:30 exactly, we will start with the panel discussion, okay? Thank you. The volunteers can show you where the prayer rooms, what the closest prayer rooms are.